So Koketso, thank you very much for making time
It's a
to share
pleasure.
your insights into the future of leadership.
It's a pleasure.
But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about your own background?
Okay, so I come from a community called Stigma in Hammanskraal, and I was raised by a single mom and grandma, surrounded by a lot of uncles, and being the only child, honestly, I think I enjoyed the attention more, and having such people as my mom and grandma, they've been my cheerleaders from day one, and that's really where I come from.
And can you tell us, as you grew up, what was your dream career?
Well, I've always wanted to be an astronaut because I was really fascinated by the cosmos. I've always wondered what else is possible in outer space. And I've also gotten into this habit of collecting articles and images related to that. But that changed very quickly when I got to high school. And I took maths and sciences as my mainstream subjects. And, as I grew into the subjects, seeing how practical they are in problem solving, I just felt like I want to do something that's more universal and allows me to actually solve problems that relate to people and that are more relatable. And that's when I changed now to just want to be a chemical engineer, and that's what inspired me to study chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering, so I
Yeah.
guess you must have had good grades.
Definitely, I worked really hard, and the fact that my family made room for me to be into my studies just gave me an opportunity to give it my best, and I came out quite. Okay.
And tell us who inspired you in those early years?
Wow, my grandmother. I spent a lot of time with her, and she would tell me stories of how she would have loved to be a nurse or a teacher or all these other wonderful careers, but a lot has hindered her. And where I am now, I'm inspired to make the most of what I have. And moreover, looking in my community, there isn't much academic background or role models. It's a very notorious community from as far back as I can remember, But now, having been in that kind of space and her continually reminding me that I actually have better opportunities, that has always pushed me to do better and to make the most of where I am and what I have. And, I pushed that energy towards my studies. So I worked really hard. I still work hard, and that yielded pretty well because it allowed me opportunities where I can be part of different programs, through public speaking in the schooling environment, through debate and all those kind of stuff. For me, that presented an opportunity, to look through the window of other possibilities apart from where I was. And I didn't look back given that opportunity. I really took those involvements very seriously, and that added up to the person that I am today.
Can you tell us, you mentioned your community is where you grew up is a notorious community.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about what's really going on.
Wow, actually a lot happens. There's been very traumatizing stories of murders happening in the community. We still experience robberies. People my age have dropped out of school, or they're already raising kids, but they're not working on anything to develop their skills apart from matric if they've done their matric. So it's a very challenging situation to just be in that space and witness all these lives that are stagnant, but at the same time they don't inspire. They don't aspire to be anything better than that. Every time you go back. For me, every time I went back, it was like I'm the golden child, But I see all these young lives, and to me, each and every child is a golden child, but they don't see it. And for me, it's gotten so frustrating that maybe they're not as fortunate to see things from my perspective, or maybe they haven't had the opportunity to peek through the window of opportunities like I did, being a strong academic student and thus having had the opportunities. So it's continually challenged me to say, what else can I do? How can I help? How can I make someone's life better? Because there should be something better. And I must admit, it's been like that for as far back as I can remember. Growing up, that's how the community has been. When you go beyond my community and you tell them where you come from, people, they just give you this reaction to say, actually, we acknowledge where you come from. We know what it's like, and we don't like the sound of that. So sometimes I've had to endure destigmatizing how I'm seen in relation to where I come from. So it's that kind of community.
Now, you're doing a lot of community work, and
Yeah.
I believe you've developed a youth leadership network.
Yes, Youth Leadership Investment Network.
Okay,
In
can
short,
you-
it's called WILAN.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So, how it started is I was just looking at how young people come from the very same communities as me, but they have the potential and there are opportunities out there except that they do not know. So, WILAN's objective was to have a mental paradigm shift amongst young people to see themselves beyond their circumstances. So for me, WILAN is that window through which they look through to say there are other possibilities. I can become a better person beyond my circumstances. And what we do is we've developed programs that focus on three main pillars, that being health education, moral regeneration, and leadership. Leadership, sometimes we think of it as something that's superficial, but we want them to understand that it starts with the self. When you fall, you get back up. When you come from a challenging situation, you need to understand that's not permanent, and things like that. So it's just challenging their mindset and also giving them an opportunity to be in a completely different space. And we achieve that through the camps that we host. Can be a weekend long camp, can be a week-long camp. But through that, we're trying to say, look, there's something better. You can be better and you're able to achieve your dreams, but you just need to understand that wherever you are isn't really a fixed or permanent situation.
And tell us, you mentioned you've been stigmatized because of where you come from.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
So obviously, like I said, Stigma is like a very notorious community, and
Right.
people have heard the stories to say this is what happens in that community. It's like the things you read about on newspapers, right? But now when you meet somebody and you tell them that's where you come from, they immediately think about the stories they've heard, and they're like, maybe you must associate with the things I've heard about the place. But I've strived to really be outstanding and to be different from my community. So now you have to prove yourself that I am not where I come from. I am not my circumstances. I may have not chosen where my story starts, but I definitely have the choice of how it unfolds and where it ends. So that stigmatization comes from them reading about something, and now they're meeting face to face someone who comes from there. It's like, oh my word, how do I deal with this? Do they have the same qualities? Do they have the same attitude? Do they behave the same way that I've heard their stories? So it becomes a challenge. And now another important thing is to try and help others detach from that stigma, to say when you go out, it's not where you come from. You choose who you become, and you can be different from where you come from.
Now tell us, was there one event in your life that turned your life around, where things could have gone different, maybe very different?
Definitely. I think in 2016, when I was still studying in my undergraduate chemical engineering at the University of Pretoria, I failed most of my courses in that year. And, growing up being applauded for my academic excellence, that threw me off and it hit me hard because I've always identified with that. So now the one thing that I've always identified with was challenged, and I was now in this place where I was really devastated and I was trying to figure out where to from here. But at the same time, it presented me with an opportunity, to now differentiate what I do from who I am. So if I wasn't my achievements, then I wasn't my failure. But definitely I must be something more. And that has propelled me now to figure out what else is possible if what I already know is put on pause. I was just out in search to find out what else can I do, what else am I capable of. And that combined obviously with curiosity and seeing the challenges in my community and beyond that has now propelled me to channel my energy into that direction, where I now co-founded WILAN in 2016. And that changed everything because maybe if I was still comfortable in my academic excellence and still feeling like I'm doing okay and still identifying with that one thing I've always identified with, I feel like I wouldn't have allowed myself to be creative and to go out and ask myself what else is possible, what else can I do, because that now set the tone for me, and that changed everything. Because once I'd started with WILAN, I was able to gain experiences, I gained mentors, I gained exposure, and moreover in the same year I was enlisted as one of the top 10 young social entrepreneurs by Monash South Africa through its MSA Lead program. So it's a fellowship program, and across the country they only needed 10 young social entrepreneurs. But looking back, if I had sat back and sulked in my own failures, I really couldn't have achieved any of those, because that was only the beginning for me. And moving forward in the same year, I had to represent South Africa in the annual youth dialogue by the Mandela Institute of Development Studies. So they were looking at young people that can engage their peers on issues of elections and governance. If you can remember properly, that's when elections were ongoing at the time. And, it just presented me with various other opportunities. Fast forward to this year, I was enlisted as 100 Mandelas of the Future by News 24. So it changed the whole course. If I was just comfortable in what I've always known, who knows what I could have been by now.
And tell us, Koketso, what is driving you today?
Wow. I think before I even start about today, when I was much younger, I was driven by just the feeling of being admired and appreciated for my academic excellence, like I said. But, as I grew up out of that, I really have been driven by just a desire to live a meaningful life, to add value in the lives of others, and also to just be able to be that lighthouse for other young people who might believe that wherever they're starting is just the doom of their life. And I believe I'm in the perfect position to do that, because I know exactly what it feels like. But I've been able to come out of that, and I believe that there are a lot of other young people waiting for somebody to tell them that it is possible, it can be done. And not just being told, but we're also witnessing it through your own life. So for me, it's one of those things that continue to push me. And moreover, I see my youth and my energy as a tool. So I strive to make the most of that wherever I'm positioned. I know I won't be young forever, but I want to be in a place where I appreciate my youth and my energy, and I use it as a tool, either to empower, either to challenge the status quo and the related. Because what I can tell you is also, when I was very young, I was challenged as a young female girl who wanted to do the sciences, and people were like, are you mad? Those things are difficult. But for me, it's now also continually challenges status quo, because there's still people still think in that kind of manner. But I believe that my life now can be that vehicle where it changes the mindset of people to say, you don't have to see people in the one way and box them in this one brown box. You need color the box, do things to it. And that's just how I want my life to unfold, to have it being impactful, inspiring, challenging, and just an example to somebody who doesn't think that some things are possible.
So Koketso, let's talk about leadership.
Okay.
What does the future of leadership mean to you?
Wow, for me, the future of leadership means a challenge and opportunity. It's a challenge in that we need to be able to inspire and rightfully equip those around us and behind us, so that they're able to understand what is the purpose of leadership, and also to respect the responsibility and call that it is, because people underestimate the meaning of it. They mistake it for titles, they mistake it for positions, but leadership is a responsibility. So it's a challenge for us to help people understand the heart of it, the core of it, and also to just really instill upholding principles such as dignity. So for us, it's a challenge to actually be able to instill that kind of desire to lead with principles and dignity. But it's also an opportunity to have conversations today, conversations to say what has worked and what hasn't. And for those things that haven't worked, how can we solve the problems moving forward? So it's also a way of seeing how best can we adapt leadership to the ever-evolving society through technology, through cultures, our manner of engagement. It changes all the time. So how do we adapt leadership to be relevant with the changing times?
Now, you're working with a lot of young leaders, aspiring leaders. Can you tell us, maybe on the ground, how does that work? What's the response you're getting? And especially in terms of mindset, How do you go about changing somebody's mindset, especially when they are from a downtrodden community like the one you're from? How does that work?
I think first of all, you need to be in a position where you are the listener before you can just shove down ideas in their mind. So be present to listen and to understand. Ask questions that help you understand this person's perspective on life and also their why. There's usually a major reason behind every story. There's that why, and I think that's what you need to understand, so that when you engage them, you're able to challenge their why. Because sometimes they just conclude that my life turned out this way because my parents 1, 2, 3, or my life turned out this way because I come from this and that community. But it takes listening and understanding before engaging, because sometimes all these people, all that they want sometimes is just to be heard, and sometimes they don't have that space where they can be heard, so they express that in different ways, in some sort of negative energy. They express that frustration in various forms. But if you give them the opportunity to say, I'm here to listen, I want to understand, what are your thoughts, what are you thinking? Because another challenge with our communities, especially in where I come from, young people don't really have a say over parents. So there isn't an environment that fosters engagement between parents and their children, or as young people. So that in turn blocks way for open communication to understand what is the problem, what is the motive behind things. And I think that is a problem. So for me, giving them a platform to be understood and to be heard, and then engaging them on that. So it should be more of assisting them through the thought process and not just feeding them ideas.
And from your own experience, what is the best age to engage young leaders?
I think at this point, from my experience, most older young people have convinced themselves that, this is my life and it is set. And it's very difficult to really change that kind of mindset. I'm not saying it's possible, but it really becomes such a challenge because they must have acquired certain experiences where they've convinced themselves that this must be my life, or this is where I'm bound to be. But I think it's best to engage younger people when they're about 10, 11, they're still in primary. You'll be amazed the kind of conversations you can have with a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old if you just assure them that I'm here to understand, not to attack you or to, look out for whatever fault you have in what you're going to say. And it's very amazing to hear their ideas and their thoughts. And I think that's the kind of age we need to start engaging them in before they even get, to high school or middle school. Yeah.
And tell me, looking back over your own journey, what is it that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Wow, I think for me it's very big that we encourage people to guard their circles. I've witnessed firsthand what it's like to have a positive circle of people that encourage, that inspire, that challenge, but also that just generally add and edify your knowledge. So for me, that's very important. Surround yourself with people that are positive and that are able to add to you as a person. And it goes from friends to, our outer circle, wherever you go, even social media, whatever that you engage with. For me, it's very important to say, what do you feed your mind? What kind of conversations do you have? How do you spend your time? Where do you spend your time? That I find very important. And secondly, mentorship. I cannot emphasize the role of mentorship in my life, because that's where I was able to really get out of my environment and reach out to higher levels, because I had people around me that cheered me on. It used to look at my potential and explore that, and not really just focus on my circumstances. So mentorship comes into play in that, and I'd advise them when older, because now you're able to be vulnerable with your knowledge gaps. And that way you say, okay, this is what I don't understand. This is where I'm stuck. And it becomes helpful because it's different when you speak to your peers, because sometimes with your peer there's some level of challenge or competition rather, and they're not able to fully add to you in that sense. But when you have a mentor, they're able to guide you because they have more experience. Maybe they've been through what you've been through. Maybe they know what to recommend to help you. They're not there to tell you how to live your life, but they're there as a guide. And I think that's also another important thing that I personally focus on, because I know how it's changed my life from when I was still in school up to where I am now. I still have mentors to date, and I don't take it for granted.
Can you maybe share a lesson or two that you learned from one of your mentors that really changed your life?
Accountability.
Okay.
If you can have somebody that you're accountable to, somebody that is able to check on your work and your progress, and you're able to be honest with them, when you slack, they're able to help you keep up. For an example, when I failed, like I said, it was a bit of a shock, because like I mentioned, I identified a lot with my academic strength. So when it was challenged, I felt so much shattered, and it took away my confidence. But when I spoke to my mentor, they reminded me that I have other skills, and my intellect is not defined by that season of failure. So it was not permanent. And they said to me, go back to the drawing board, write the things that you're thankful for, write the things that you'd like to explore in terms of your skills and the related. And for me, to have somebody believe in me, even when I didn't have anything to show for it, that I deserve it, it was such a big plus, and I still consider it a blessing, because I was able to pick up to say, okay, maybe this is not what defines me now. It's just a season, it will pass, but I can do so much better. And just having somebody cheer me on like that, it added quite a lot of value in how I progressed and how I dealt with the failure moving forward from that point.
And tell us, Koketso, is there anybody that you're mentoring at this point in time?
Definitely. There's quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
I can think of, there's quite a lot. It feels unfair to mention one. But for example, there is a young lady at Wits studying for their business studies, and, excuse me.
Right.
And I met them in grade 11. They were still very young. And since then, we've engaged a lot through to their grade 12 until they adjusted into varsity. And to just witness their growth and being able to be in a position where they themselves take initiative, for me, I feel fulfilled to see somebody grow like that, because they come from the same community as me. But just for them to know and understand that there's somebody that cheers me on and they've got my back, and they come from the same place as me, they don't stop at anything to shy. It means that I can also do the same. And for me, it just gives me so much joy to see them grow, because recently they were like, hey, actually I want to start a blog, because I usually have all these ideas and I don't know what to do with them. I don't know what to do with my pieces of writing. I was like, you can start a blog. So for me, growth and adding value is being able to see somebody, being self-propellant even when you're not there.
And tell us, what have you learned from your own mentoring journey, mentoring others, that you feel is really important, that works? And if you had to encourage somebody to become a mentor, how would you suggest they should go about?
Put yourself in the person's shoes and try to imagine the kind of help you would have appreciated, but also being mindful of the fact that you don't need to spoon feed the person. You just need to be their encourager and their guide. And I think it's very important, because when you're able to position yourself where the other person is, you're able to better understand what they're dealing with and how to support them. And to me, secondly, communication is very important. You're not there to just, put in ideas in somebody's head. You need to question, you need to understand. Like I said, be there to listen and to understand, and that way you're able to know how to help. Sometimes it takes just helping them through a thought process, and not necessarily saying you need to do 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And tell us, when you speak to young leaders, what is it that you tell them they should focus on for building their own career, and maybe even future-proofing their career?
Wow. For me, it's very big that you rather future-proof yourself from not having a career, because that will eventually be phased out. And as you can see, artificial intelligence coming in, people are panicking because they're like, we're losing jobs and everything. But it's very important that, young leaders focus on self-education, because that kind it's not the kind you graduate from. It's something that you will do continually, and you add value to yourself, and you're guided by your curiosity, by your skills. So you know your weaknesses and strengths, and you know what or how to add to yourself. And secondly, build relationships. I think in as much as we panic about, the fact that technology is advancing so fast, I don't think it will advance too fast for the human race to catch up, because we're the ones that create it. So one of the things I like saying is that you can never take away human interaction, and that's where I encourage that they build relationships. If you can attend seminars, you do that. If you can attend expos, you do that, and talk to people, find out what do they do, how do they do it, and the like, and that's how you learn. And for me, it's very important that you continually have curiosity, because you can't be comfortable with what you know. So it doesn't take, much for somebody to fall behind. All you have to do is just stand still, and everything else as it moves, you eventually be left behind. So you can't be that person who's left behind.
And tell us, when it comes to technology,
Yeah.
which technologies do you think future leaders should learn, should spend time studying, and hopefully master?
Social media is one that's already been advancing, and I think it's gonna really go beyond what we've already experienced it to be, and becomes a very powerful tool to impact, to influence, to share ideas. But I also would encourage young leaders to look into platforms like, for me, programming is the next universal language, and it's the one way in which you can solve problems. So sometimes you don't have to be an expert in the skill, but at least have a basic understanding, because when you know better, you do better, and when you know what is available, you know how to use it. And for me, that's very important. And in addition to that, I see us going beyond the instant messaging apps, because as a diverse community or society, it gets to a point where we need to exchange ideas and skills more effectively. But I've been looking at things such as webinars, and I'd like to see those advance the manner of engagement between larger crowds, but also in terms of not just idea exchange, but skills exchange, because I can know the one thing and not have the other, and someone else has a skill that I do not have. But how can we have that skills exchange in a platform that allows us to do so flexibly and with some level of trust, to say they're giving their best foot up front, and I'm able to take the lesson with it.
And Koketso, tell us, how are you using social media for your own leadership, and which social media platforms do you focus on?
Well, I use social media to talk about my work, to share my experiences, and sometimes some of my achievements, like with the nominations and lists that I've been a part of, to just let people that, when you put in the work, somebody else out there is watching. And I use it also to just share ideas and the principles that I value. So it's always best that on social media you associate or share ideas that you'll be proud to own up to in person, even if it's just by association, it's not your ideas originally. So predominantly active on LinkedIn and Facebook, as well as Twitter. So for me, those, I run with them. So whatever that I do, I share my ideas there, but I also show interest in what others are doing, because it's not a one-way channel. You need to be able to engage people as well in their interests, so that you gain support the same way that you would expect that.
And tell us, when you speak to your own future leaders, what do you tell them? How should they use social media?
I think in the same way that I have experienced it, use it as a platform where you sell your brand, where you share your work, so that people understand what you're doing, they know how to support you, and they know how to partner with you if it comes to it. And own up to your ideas. You can't expect to be received in the one way in person, whereas you portray yourself in the other way on social media, because those two things are one. They must be your ideas. So try to be as authentic and genuine as possible. And like I said, if you can own up to the ideas or the things you share in person, then you're in the right track, and be consistent in that. Another thing that I encourage is that they be engaging with other people's projects and ideas, but now you need to articulate your thoughts properly before you engage the ideas of other people, because you don't want to be disrespectful or offensive, because that eventually affects your brand and how people will receive you.
And tell us, Koketso, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study?
Yeah. Putima Hangela is one. She's my favorite because I've also heard her for my first empowerment conference and launch for Wyland. So she's very authentic and very gracious in how she deals with herself and her work, and she's very readily supportive of young people. She really does reach out, and I admire her calm. Her calm doesn't mean that she's lacking in anything. She's gracious and still continues to be excellent in that. And for me, I admire that so much, because, you don't have to make noise. You just let your work do the talking. And secondly, Tulima Donsela. She's such a public figure, and having served in our government, for me, she stands out in what it means to stay true to your cause. You focus on the purpose over what is popular. You don't have to be appreciated for what people think favors them. You have to stand for the truth, and for me, she represents that consistency in sticking to your principles as a leader. So for me, that stands out, because a lot of people fall back when it comes to that. They become comfortable in their position and in their roles and the like. They forget the why. And it takes away the whole purpose of what leadership means and what it is. And thirdly, Vosithe Mbekwayo, obviously very known figure as well. What I admire about him is he's really firm about pulling each other up. So he understands the strength that comes with working together and as a collective. And I admire that, because it's something that I aspire to work towards, to be a collective along with my peers, to work to something bigger. And secondly, I love the idea that he's able to share in his experiences and knowledge. He's really done well, excelling in his skills and spheres of work, so much that he readily shares that with people. And for me, if you're able to take others along, I think that's what we call winning. Because if you can go on along by yourself, then you really lose it, because then you're just alone there up front and everybody's like, okay, then what? And for me, those three people stand out for me just by their different styles of leadership and how they continue to use their platforms as vehicles to impact other people.
And tell us, Koketso, are there any books about leadership that you can recommend to future leaders?
For me, the big one was Outliers. Somehow I forgot the author.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell, yes. For me, it stood out because it says to you, what do you believe about yourself? And when you are different, do you take that and sit on a corner and moan about it? Or do you go out to say, what can I do with this? And for me, it really challenged me, because I've had to think about how I see myself. And like I mentioned previously, differentiate what I do with who I am. And for me, that was very important. So Outliers said, hey, if you feel out of place, you're not weird, you extraordinary, and just run with that. And then second one is how to win friends and influence people. And for me, it was just about building relationships and respecting people and how you engage with them. And I loved how it challenged me, because I've always thought, I'm good with public speaking and communication and the like, but I had to sit back and say, okay, how do I do things better now? And like I said, human interaction can never be taken away, no matter how much technology is advancing. And for me, that's a very powerful book, because when you're a leader and when you're wherever you are in whatever space, it's all about people. It's all about engaging with people, hearing them out, talking to them, and they're related. And for me, that was very important.
Now, last but not least, Koketso, how can people follow you, and how can they best connect with you?
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn as Koketso Mbewe.
Right.
I'm also on Twitter. It's a very tricky handle, but
Yeah.
it's KOK3TSO underscore KAY. So it's Koketso underscore K, but the E is a 3 instead.
Okay.
And then I'm on Facebook as Koketso K Mbewe, K as in KAY. So
Right.
Koketso K Mbewe. And then still working on my personal website, but so long they can check out www.wyland-sa.com, and that is where you will find a description of our work and all the things related to Youth Leadership Investment Network. But otherwise, as soon as my website is out, I'll make sure that I share it on all my social media platforms so that everybody can have a go-to place about my involvements, my interests, and the related, and how they can get involved.
And is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should consider in their own leadership?
Wow, I think take leadership as a responsibility to serve, but also to make a difference. And secondly, be authentic in that. So always go back to the why so that you don't deviate to serve your own interests or to even forget about, the cost of your journey. And for me, another big thing is to always remember that you are not what you do. So you always separate from what you do, but always strive to do best. So what I'm trying to say by that is the way I've experienced failure has instead propelled me than to hold me back. And for me, leadership is also being able to lead the self when challenges come and say, where to from here? Because that way you're able to then lead the masses.
Well, Koketso, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom and giving us inspiration and encouragement.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And please use your influence if you have as a role model, that you have as a future leader, and that you have as somebody that is very well known in the country. Please use this influence for good as you do. And thank you for helping us build a better country.
Thank you so much. It's only a pleasure.